My kids said they were throwing me a surprise party for my 72nd birthday at church. So you'll know we still love you, Mum. That morning I put on my nicest dress, my hands shaking around a bouquet of flowers. But when I walked into the fellowship hall, the chairs where my friends usually sit were all empty. The only people there were my children, a lawyer, a thick stack of papers and a pen with the cap already off, waiting for the signature of the birthday girl. My name is Ellen. I live in a small town in the Midwest, the kind of place people drive through without really seeing. We've got one main street with a few shops, a gas station, a red brick church, and a scatter of low houses that look like somebody tossed them across a field and left them where they landed. I've lived here most of my life. My house is a pale green one-story at the end of a dead-end road. Out back there's a little garden with tomatoes, beans, squash, and some rose bushes my husband Bill planted years ago, back when we had more energy than money. Bill is gone now, 3 years. Some mornings I still wake up and reach across the bed, expecting to find his warmth, and my hand only meets that cold dip in the mattress that never quite fluffs back up. When that happens, I usually lie there a minute with my palm on the empty sheet, listening to the wind through the window and the trucks on the highway, trying to swallow down that tight, burning lump in my throat. Bill and I were never rich. He worked as a mechanic at a little garage. I waited tables, then later worked at the grocery store. We saved a little at a time. We patched the roof ourselves, laid down our own tile when we could afford it, and bought furniture slowly, second-hand, sturdy, not fancy. This house might just look like an old starter home to someone else, but to me it's a lifetime. It's where Bill collapsed from his first heart attack, where I held him and cried, where our 3 kids ran up and down the hallway laughing until I thought the walls would burst. Our oldest is Mark. He got Bill's quick way of talking, but his eyes always go to money first. He's in business. I've never quite understood what exactly he does. I just know he went broke once on a bad investment, then somehow bounced back faster than I could follow. His temper can be short, but I still picture him as the little boy who used to wrap his arms around my leg and bawl when he fell off his bike. Our second is Susan. She lives in the city. She works in something to do with legal estate planning. Those are her words. She carries a folder and a pen the way other women carry purses or lipstick. Her voice is firm, always. She likes things done properly, and she's always talking about papers, documents, and avoiding a mess later. The youngest is Danny. He's quiet, works shifts at a plant near town. He texts me a lot. Mum, did you eat? Mum, are you sleeping okay? But doesn't say much when Mark and Susan get going. When Bill died, all 3 came home. They hovered over me those first days like I was made of glass, walking me to church, taking me out to eat, fixing leaky faucets, checking the roof. I was grateful. I clung to them the way somebody in floodwater clings to a floating board. I was so afraid of unlocking the front door and remembering nobody was inside calling, "Honey, I'm in here." But funerals are crowded. Grief afterward is not. The calls slowly turned from every day to a few times a week to, "I'll call you this weekend if I'm not too busy." They still visited, but more and more of our conversations had money hiding underneath them. "This house is too big for just you, Mom," Mark would say, eyes roaming over the ceiling, the old roof, the worn carpet. "Winters are brutal. We worry about you. We just want you to have good care," Susan would add, flipping through some papers. "There are really nice assisted living places now, full of people your age, nurses on staff. You'd have friends. What if you fall here and no one knows?" I'd nod, but my heart squeezed. I don't hate assisted living. I'm just not ready for it. Not yet. Not while I still know which floorboard creaks, which stair to skip when it rains. Every wall in this house has a piece of my life hanging on it. Every corner smells like Bill, oil and coffee and cheap aftershave. One afternoon, Susan brought over a thick folder. "These are the house documents, Mum," she said. "We just need to review whose name is on what. You know, so if anything happens later, paperwork is easier. We could move it into a joint name or better, a trust. It lowers taxes and keeps the state out. I stared at the tiny letters until they blurred. I've never been good with that kind of thing. In my head, I could hear Bill, "Don't sign anything you don't understand." My hand shook a little. "Let me think about it," I told her. After that, tension was like a thin string pulled across every family dinner. We didn't snap at each other openly, but everything sat loaded. Then one day, Mark called. "I've been thinking," he said. 72 is a big deal, Mum. We want to do something real for you this year, a surprise party in the church fellowship hall. Invite everyone who's important in your life. How's that sound?" I didn't answer right away. If I'm honest, my heart fluttered. I can't remember the last time I had a real birthday party. Usually, it's just a little grocery store cake I buy myself, a couple of rushed phone calls between meetings and kids' activities. The picture of a room full of people singing happy birthday to me made my eyes sting. "Really?" I asked, like a kid who isn't quite sure the candy is for her. "Really?" Mark laughed. "You just dress up nice. We'll handle the rest." "Make sure you invite Pastor Paul and Martha and Jenny," I added quickly. "I'd love the church ladies there. They're my family here too." Yeah, sure," Mark said, sounding distracted. "Mum, don't ask too many questions. It's a surprise." I hung up feeling both giddy and off. Mark isn't usually that sentimental, but then I scolded myself, "Don't be so suspicious. Maybe they're trying to make up for things." A few days later, Susan called. "Mum, since we'll have everyone together that day, we went ahead and hired an attorney," she said. "So if you bring your house papers with you, we can just sign the documents then. Kill two birds with one stone, party and estate planning." A cold little stone dropped in my stomach. "Why, that day?" I asked. "Because we'll all be there. The lawyer will be there. Witnesses will be there. It's perfect," Susan said. "You don't want to be sick and trying to drag yourself all over town signing stuff later, right? This way we just do it once and it's done." When I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and watched the sunlight come through the window and dance on the laminate like little golden squares. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug. In the quiet, Bill's voice came back again. "Don't sign anything you don't understand." I decided to talk to Pastor Paul. After Sunday service, I lingered in the fellowship hall until most people had left. When only a few were still stacking chairs, I walked up to him. "Pastor," I started, twisting my hands. "My kids said they're planning a surprise birthday party for me here next week. They said they're inviting everybody." "Oh?" he said, eyebrows lifting. "This is the first I've heard of it. But if they're doing it, I'm sure they'll talk to the church office soon." I hesitated, then told him about the attorney and the house papers, and the sign it while we're celebrating idea. His face grew more serious as I talked. "Ellen, do you feel comfortable signing those papers?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't want to think badly of my children, but I'm scared if I say no, they'll say I don't trust them, and if I say yes and I don't understand." I trailed off. He sighed, then gave a little nod. "Last week, Tim, the young man who plays piano sometimes, works part-time at a law office, mentioned something to me," Pastor said slowly. "He saw your name on their schedule for an estate planning meeting. The date and time matched what your kids said your party would be. My name on a law office schedule." My hands turned cold. Pastor Paul suggested I speak with a lawyer of my own, a woman he knew named Harris who often helped older folks in the church understand legal documents. I agreed. The day I went to see her, I wore Bill's old jacket. It still smelled faintly of motor oil, laundry soap, and his skin. It made me feel like he was walking beside me, at least halfway to that office. Mrs. Harris was in her 50s or 60s, with greying hair, sharp eyes, and a steady voice. She poured me a cup of tea and said, "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told her about the surprise party, about the attorney my kids hired, about the house papers, about the phrase, "Sign everything that day and be done with it." When I mentioned the law office name, the one Tim had said, she raised an eyebrow. "That's a real estate and estate firm," she said. "You don't usually need a whole production for a simple will, and tying it to a big emotional event, well, that's interesting." She called Tim to get copies of whatever had been sent over ahead of time. 15 minutes later, she had a PDF in her email, and soon a stack of printed pages sat on the desk between us. "Let's go through this line by line," she said. The letters seemed even smaller on her desk than they had at my kitchen table. My head spun. Mrs. Harris took a highlighter and began marking spots. "Here," she said, tapping. "This is a durable power of attorney. It gives your children the ability to sign for you on financial matters, loans, sales, mortgages, with very few limits, especially if a doctor says you're impaired." She flipped to another page. "And this one transfers your house into a trust," she continued. "Your children would be the trustees. You would have a right of occupancy only as long as deemed appropriate. That phrase means when they decide it is appropriate. No clear standard, no protection. So, if they decide I should go to a nursing home, they could sell or mortgage the house?" I asked, my voice paper thin. "If this is signed as written, yes, they could," she answered plainly. I sat very still. Images ran through my head. Mark racing his bike up and down our driveway, Susan putting flowers in a little jar on the coffee table, Danny sprawled on the couch with Bill watching some old Western. I had imagined this house as the place they'd bring grandkids someday, where we'd have Christmas dinners and noisy summers. I never once imagined it as something they might leverage like any other asset. "Do you think they meant it that way?" I asked, desperate for a softer answer. "What's in someone's heart only God knows," Mrs. Harris said gently. "But these documents are drawn to benefit them much more than they protect you. The question is, do you want to sign them?" I looked at my hands. The skin on them is thin now, mapped with brown spots and little blue veins. These hands have tied tiny shoes, cut sandwiches into triangles, changed bed sheets at midnight. Now these same hands were being primed to sign away the last bit of safety I had. "I don't want to," I whispered. "Then you don't have to," she said. "You have the right to say no. You also have the right to your own lawyer. I'll be at that party. Pastor Paul says he'll come too." I nodded, but the heaviness in my chest didn't lift. That night, back home, I laid out my best dress, the soft blue one Bill always liked, over the chair. I sat on the edge of my bed, opened my old Bible, read a few verses, then lifted my eyes toward the cracked bedroom ceiling. "Bill," I murmured, "if you were still here, you'd tease me for being this naive. But you know I love those kids. I don't want to think they'd hurt me. I'm scared of being pushed out of this house by my own children. If you're allowed to, just help me keep my back straight tomorrow." The morning of the party was cold and clear. Danny pulled up in his old pickup, wearing a pressed shirt and combed hair. When I opened the door, he grinned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You look beautiful, Mum," he said. "You're the star today." I smoothed my scarf and climbed in. "Is Pastor coming?" I asked in what I hoped sounded like casual curiosity. Yeah, Danny said, eyes on the road. "Susan handled all that." We drove past fields browned by the season, past leaning fence posts and small houses, each with its own unseen stories of parents and grown children and unspoken hurts. I wondered how many of them had kitchen tables where someone had once laid out papers like mine. At the church, Danny opened the fellowship hall door for me. I stepped inside, and my heart dipped. The room was decorated, but not the way our church ladies usually did it. There were a few pastel balloons and a banner that read, "Happy 72nd birthday, Mum," in big letters, Mum printed larger than my actual name. But there was no smell of Martha's baked goods, no squeak of Jenny's laugh, no sound of folding chairs being dragged into place by Henry. Instead, in the middle of the room, there was a long table. One end held a big white cake and a bouquet. The other end held a laptop, a few men in suits, and a stack of papers. Mark walked up and gave me a quick hug. "Glad you made it, Mom," he said, checking his watch. "Come sit. We've got something special planned." Susan appeared behind him in a neat dress, makeup perfect, smile tight. "Surprised?" she asked. Yes," I said, letting my eyes travel around the empty room. "Where's everyone from church? Where's Pastor? Where are Martha and Jenny?" Susan froze for half a second, then forced a little laugh. It's winter, Mum. People are busy, she said. We wanted this to be more intimate, just family. No Martha, no Jenny, no Henry. My fingers curled around themselves under the table. Mark tapped his spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. Okay, folks, he said, voice a little too cheerful. Today's Mom's 72nd. We didn't just want to eat cake and sing. We wanted to show her we've taken care of her future. He gestured to a man in a suit. This is James, the attorney I told you about, he said. The man stepped forward, smiling as he held out his hand. Mrs. Ellen, happy birthday, he said. Your children have asked me to help arrange your affairs so that everything is simple and safe for you and your family. That way you don't have to worry. Susan slid my chair closer to the paperwork. She placed a pen in front of me, uncapped, pointing right where signatures go. These are the documents we've talked about, she said in that gentle but firm tone she uses when she's already made up her mind. Power of attorney, the trust for the house. This stuff keeps the state out and makes everything easier. We'll handle it. You just sign, then we cut cake and celebrate. James started buzzing through his explanation. I caught words like efficiency, avoid probate, flexibility. They sounded like wind whipping against siding. What cut through was his phrase, after the transfer, the property will be administered by the trustees on your behalf, and the way he kept saying, your children, instead of their names. Mark leaned toward me and set his hand on my wrist. You don't want the government deciding for you later, do you, Mum? He asked quietly. Signing today is the smartest thing for everyone. Susan nodded, adding her weight. And if something happens, if you fall, if you get confused, we'll already be in place to take care of things, she said. Honestly, Mum, this is us loving you. That last line stung more than any of the legal language. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked around one more time. No pastor, no church friends, only strangers in suits watching me like I was a form to be completed. You said this was a birthday party, I said slowly. Why don't I see any of my friends? Why don't I see Pastor here? The air in the room shifted. Mark exhaled sharp. Mom, we told you. We wanted this to be close family, he said. Don't make this into some big thing. I let my gaze drop to the pen. My fingers touched it, then pushed it gently back into the middle of the table. Did you invite Pastor? I asked again. Susan opened her mouth. But just then, the fellowship hall door swung open. Sorry, I'm running a little late. Pastor Paul stepped inside, coat still on, knit cap in hand. Behind him came Mrs. Harris with her leather bag and thin stack of papers, and Tim hovering awkwardly near the doorway. Tim gave me a quick, nervous wink. My knees almost went weak with relief. Hello, Ellen. Hello, everyone, Pastor said, smiling as he looked around. I heard today's a special day, a birthday and some important signing. I thought it might be wise for a few of us to be here, to pray and to witness. We like things to be in the light, don't we? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mark stared at me. You called them? He asked, voice low. Before I could answer, Mrs. Harris stepped forward and shook James's hand. I'm Harris, Mrs. Ellen's counsel, she said calmly. She came to my office a few days ago with some concerns. I thought it best to join her today. I hope you don't mind. James hesitated, then put on his professional smile again. Of course, he said. Everything we're doing is for her benefit. In that case, Mrs. Harris replied, pulling a set of pages from her bag, I'm sure you won't mind if we walk through the documents together. Tim moved closer to me and whispered, I saw your name on our calendar and got worried. I told Pastor, I hope that's okay. I set my hand on his and squeezed. It's more than okay, I whispered back. Thank you. Mrs. Harris laid out her copies, the same ones Tim had emailed her earlier. With a highlighter in hand, she began pointing things out, speaking clearly enough for everyone around the table to hear. Here, Ellen, she said, tapping a paragraph. This says that once your house is put into this trust, your children become the trustees. You only have the right to live there as long as deemed appropriate by the trustees. There's no clear definition of what appropriate is. She looked up, then continued. That means if they decide it's appropriate for you to move to a facility, they can sell or mortgage the house without your consent, she said. Is that what you want? You could have heard a pin drop. She turned another page. And this durable power of attorney, she went on. It gives them broad authority to act in your name, taking out loans, making transfers. There are almost no limits written into it. Again, is that what you want? There was a soft swallowing sound somewhere in the room. Maybe me, maybe Susan. Mark shot to his feet. All right, that's enough, he snapped. This is a private family matter. My mother doesn't need you or the pastor meddling. Pastor Paul held his gaze, sadness in his eyes more than anger. Mark, he said gently, if this is truly for her good, there should be no harm in her understanding every word. Love doesn't hide the fine print. Susan stayed seated, eyes shiny. She turned to me, her voice shaking and sharp at the same time. So you don't trust us? She said. You had to bring in outsiders? My throat burned. For years I've told myself that if anyone would protect me, it would be my children. I clung to that after Bill died. Family was the word I wrapped around myself like a blanket when nights were cold and long. But the papers in front of me weren't a blanket, they were a net. I'm not saying I don't want to trust you, I said slowly. I'm saying I can't sign something that could be used to push me out of my own home. You really think we'd do that to you? Mark shot back. I looked straight into his face. Behind the stubble and the lines of stress, I could still see that little boy with bloody knees. But the man in front of me had arranged this entire day not just to celebrate me, but to get my signature while my guard was down. I don't know what you would or wouldn't do, I answered quietly, but these papers would let you, and I can't give that kind of power to anyone, not even my own children. Susan burst into tears. I just wanted you to be safe, she cried. You don't understand the pressure we're under. Taxes, college for the kids, long-term care. Everybody does this now. Setting up trusts is normal. Safety doesn't mean I stop having a say, I replied. I'm afraid of getting sick. I'm afraid of falling, but I'm more afraid of being turned into a name on a loan document. At the doorway, I saw movement. Martha had come in, then Jenny, then old Henry with his cane. A few others from church stood behind them. They'd heard Pastor came and they'd followed. Nobody spoke, but I could feel their eyes on us. Mrs. Harris leaned slightly toward me. The choice is yours, she reminded me softly. You are under no obligation to sign anything today or ever. I picked up the pen, held it for a moment, then set it down and slid it and the documents back toward James. Today is my 72nd birthday, I said. If you want to give me a gift, let it be your love, not a trap disguised as planning. Mark's face flushed red. You just embarrassed us in front of the whole church, he snapped. Congratulations, Mum. You made us the bad guys. Better a little embarrassment than you losing your home, Martha murmured from the back. Her voice wasn't loud, but everyone heard. Susan stood up, mascara streaking. Fine, she said, voice breaking. If you don't trust us, say so. Don't hide behind lawyers and pastors. I thought we were doing the right thing. She turned and walked quickly toward the door, shoulders stiff. Danny stayed where he was. After a second, he stepped closer and put a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Mom, he said quietly. I didn't really read all that stuff. I just went along. You're the youngest, but you're still a grown man, I told him softly. You're allowed to think for yourself. The tension slowly eased. Pastor suggested we pray before we cut cake. Not to take sides, he said, but to ask God to show each of us what's really in our hearts. So we bowed our heads. I heard his prayer, but over it my own words rose. Lord, give me the strength to live with the pain of doing what's right, even if it means not going back to what felt easier. We did cut the cake. We did sing Happy Birthday, though the song came out thin and fragile. I blew out the candles with the taste of frosting and fear in my mouth, feeling like I had just stepped through an invisible doorway, from a world where I believed blood alone was enough, into a world where boundaries were as necessary as air. The days after were not easy. My phone rang constantly at first. Sometimes it was Mark, angry, telling me I'd backstabbed them and made them look like monsters. Sometimes it was Susan sobbing, sometimes cold, accusing me of letting strangers plant ideas in my head. Danny texted to check in and fix things around the house, but avoided talking about that day. I hurt. I won't pretend I didn't. The ache isn't just in your chest when your kids disappoint you, it's in your bones. But underneath the hurt, there was also something else, relief. I hadn't let my hand sign something my heart was screaming no to. I went back to see Mrs. Harris. This time, I was the one asking for documents. We drew up a new plan, a will that said I had the right to stay in my home as long as I wanted and was able to, and that if I ever became unable to decide for myself, a trusted friend from church and my lawyer would help, not just whichever child pushed hardest. My assets would be divided, part to the grandkids if they grew up to live decently, part to a fund that helps older people who've been pressured or scammed, part to my kids, but with clear conditions that any attempt to bully or trick me now would cost them their share later. Signing that, my hand didn't shake. I understood every line. Pastor started a little group at church. Older members who wanted to learn about their rights, the meaning of all these fancy words people throw at them. Power of attorney, deed, beneficiary, trust. I went to the first meeting. I sat in a circle of wrinkled faces, all of us squinting at printouts. I don't even know what I signed, one woman admitted. My son just put it in front of me and said, "Sign, Mum, we're in a hurry." I was scared to ask questions. I told them my story, from the surprise party to the open pen on the table. Some shook their heads, some wiped their eyes, some just stared down at their hands like they were seeing them for the first time. Afterward, people hugged me. "Thank you for saying what I've been too afraid to say," one man whispered. "I thought it was just my family." Things with Mark didn't completely shatter, but they cracked deep. He didn't come to my house for months. When he called, his voice was cold. "You made us look like vultures in front of the whole community," he said once. "If something happens later, don't expect us to step in." "That's your decision," I answered calmly. "I'm not planning my life around guilt or threats anymore." Susan softened over time. One afternoon, she brought her 2 kids by. She sat on the old couch Bill used to nap on and turned his wedding ring around and around her finger. "I'm sorry I made you feel cornered," she said, eyes on the floor. "I've got so much on my plate. Mortgage, tuition, bills. People told me putting the house in a trust and getting power of attorney was the smart thing. I thought I was being responsible. The idea might have been fine," I said, "but the way you went about it wasn't. If you had talked to me openly, if you'd given me time, if you'd accepted that I might say no, things might have been different." She nodded, tears dripping onto her hands. People can relearn how to talk to each other, but documents don't vanish just because we pretend they weren't wrong. Once you see the crack, you can't pretend the glass was never broken. Danny kept coming by to mow the lawn, oil the door hinges, change light bulbs. One evening as he was leaving, he lingered in the doorway, keys turning over and over in his palm. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Not signing, I mean. Not signing? No," I said. "What I regret is not teaching you earlier that love and boundaries can exist at the same time." The years went by. My knees got worse. My eyesight dimmed faster, but I stayed in my pale green house. I still made weak coffee in the mornings and cracked the window a little, just long enough to let the cold air bite before I shut it again. I still went to church on Sundays, 3rd pew on the left, humming along to the old hymns Bill used to love. When I turned 75, the church decided to hold a joint birthday celebration for everyone over 70. Pastor asked if I wanted to join. "As long as there aren't any lawyers and pre-uncapped pens," I joked. He laughed from deep in his chest. The fellowship hall that day looked different from my party 3 years before. The decorations were simple, some flowers picked from gardens, a few homemade posters the kids had drawn, cupcakes and coffee. No banners with giant Mom printed on them. no laptops, no man in a suit waiting at the end of the table. Pastor asked if I'd share a few words. I shuffled up to the mic, notes clutched in my hand, then folded them and slipped them back into my pocket. I had another birthday party here once, I began. Back then, I wore my nicest dress, thinking I was walking into a room full of people to sing to me. Instead, I walked into a room where the main attraction wasn't cake. It was a pen and a stack of documents that would have let someone else decide what happened to me and my home. The room grew quiet. I saw faces I'd prayed with, laughed with, cried with. A few faces, newer, looked at me in surprise. On that day, God sent me a nervous young man who noticed my name on a law office schedule. He sent me a pastor who took my fears seriously. He sent me a lawyer who explained what I didn't understand. He sent me friends who showed up at that hall door at just the right time, I said. And he gave me enough courage to push that pen away. Some people say I embarrassed my family. Maybe I did. But if I had signed because I was scared they'd be mad, I would have spent the rest of my life being scared of my own children. I just want to say this, especially to anyone here whose hair is as white as mine. Loving your kids doesn't mean handing them all the keys to your life. You have the right to understand. You have the right to say no. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but warm and steady. In the back row, I noticed Susan sitting with her kids. She'd slipped in quietly at some point. Her eyes were shiny, and when our gazes met, she gave me a small, trembly nod. Mark didn't come. Danny texted me a long message about how proud he was. I've stopped expecting a perfect picture. Life rarely gives those. I know this much. I stood there, 75 years old, in a room that actually smelled like coffee and sugar and old wood, blowing out candles on a cake Martha baked in her own oven. Around me were people who may not share my blood, but who respect my no as much as my yes, people who would never shove a pen under my hand and call it love. I took a deep breath and blew out the candles. The smoke curled up and disappeared into the air. Laughter and clinking cups filled the room. Through the fellowship hall window, I could see sunlight pouring across the church lawn, catching dust in the air like tiny stars. This time, I knew for certain. This birthday was really mine. Not bait, not leverage, not a trap wrapped in balloons and ribbon, just a small, honest celebration of a life that, finally, belongs to me.